The thick glass revolving door opened slowly as if it too understood that the person stepping inside was no ordinary woman. Yet no one in the Hartley and Grace jewelry store Beverly Hills branch even looked up. A black woman, 45 years old, tall with a calm face and eyes that gleamed with lived experience. She wore a midnight blue blazer. On her left wrist was a dull silver bracelet scratched along the edges, not the kind of accessory this store usually sold. Her natural curls were pulled back neatly, revealing a high forehead and a gaze not easily ignored. She stopped directly in front of the central glass case in the main hall, the one that displayed the Soleil Royal collection home to the brand's rarest diamonds. Spotlights poured down over the glass, illuminating each cut, each fragment of artificial sparkle. But she wasn't looking at the diamonds. She was looking at the 3-degree misalignment between the glass case and the tile grain on the floor. "Can I help you with something?" A woman's voice rose sweet enough but colder than the air conditioner. She lifted her head. A white woman in her late 30s with blonde hair curled in a classic style stood across from her. Her name tag read Elaine Saunders, store manager. Celeste Hartley gave a soft, polite smile, the kind a new customer would offer. "I'd like to see the Soleil Royal collection." Elaine's smile didn't fade, but it changed like a door quietly shutting behind her eyes. "That's our highest-end collection," she said, her voice slowing. "Each piece starts at $200,000. Are you looking for something specific for a special occasion?" Celeste tilted her head slightly. "I just want to take a look." Elaine's tone dropped like someone gently discouraging a child. "I understand, but we usually don't open the display case unless customers have a prior appointment. And typically, guests are invited to view it in the VIP lounge." Celeste maintained her thin smile, but no one noticed her hand subtly tightening around her purse strap. Just then, a white couple entered, silver-haired, wearing gold watches and Italian leather shoes. Elaine instantly lit up like Christmas lights. "Mr. and Mrs. Masterson. So lovely to see you again." She turned her back, leaving Celeste standing there alone in front of the glass case she had designed down to the last millimeter. She said nothing, just gently touched the old silver bracelet on her wrist, the final piece of jewelry her mother had left before passing. She felt no anger, only coldness. And in that cold, a storm was beginning to form. Celeste Hartley's mornings always began before sunrise. At 5 a.m., the alarm rang from the clock beside an old photo frame, a picture of her mother sitting on the porch, hands weaving the silver bracelet now worn on her daughter's wrist. Celeste rose unhurried as if every movement had a clear purpose. She brewed a cup of black tea. No sugar, sat at a wooden desk she built herself and opened a weathered notebook with bronze-gilded edges. On the first page, scribbled in uneven handwriting, were the words, "Dreams have no address, but willpower always finds a way." Celeste Hartley, 45 years old, CEO and founder of Hartley and Grace, a luxury jewelry chain present in 50 major U.S. cities, with last year's revenue exceeding $180 million. She had appeared on the cover of Forbes, hailed as the first black queen of gemstones in modern fashion. Yet every morning she still drank tea in her rooftop apartment in Inglewood, still drove her 2004 Honda Civic to the office, still hand-washed her laundry on Sundays, still declined every offer to hire a chauffeur. Not because she needed to save money, but because she needed to remember. To remember what it felt like when a bank officer rejected her loan application for insufficient credentials, even though she brought a sketchbook with over 200 original designs. To remember the day she was asked to leave a boutique for trying on rings too long without appearing to be a buyer. And to remember that winter night when she was 24 when her mother died in an unheated apartment because Celeste had spent their savings to buy her first sapphire stone. They called her CEO, but she called herself a gatekeeper of memory. And that's why every month she performed a ritual: choose a store, any location, whether in Chicago or Atlanta, and visit it without notice. Not for inspection, but to feel the air. To see if employees smiled at a woman with no makeup. To know whether the store still carried the spirit she had built from the ashes of the past. This morning, her assistant, Malik, had been surprised when she said, "Beverly Hills. I want to visit that one today. But, ma'am, that's our flagship store managed by Elaine. The team there is very—" Celeste raised her hand, cutting him off. "I know." In truth, she had chosen Beverly Hills for another reason. Rumors had begun circulating from other branches that Elaine only served high-class clients, that a black employee had been transferred for speaking to customers without the proper luxury tone. Celeste wasn't someone who believed in rumors. She believed in instinct. And this morning, her instincts told her it was time to examine the glittering shell that might be rotting on the inside. The tires of her dark, aging Civic rolled to a stop in front of Hartley and Grace's gleaming glass entrance in Beverly Hills. No one in the store turned to look at the car. No one imagined that the owner of the brand was stepping out of the least glamorous vehicle on the block. She didn't care. Inside, Celeste walked slowly, back straight, eyes scanning every design detail, light reflected off prismatic fixtures onto polished stones, classical music echoing gently in the background. But what made her pause wasn't a misaligned diamond. It was the central display case slightly askew from the tile line beneath it. To most people, it is an invisible flaw. To Celeste, the first sign of a lost devotion to meticulousness. She said nothing. She watched and waited. Waited to see how the world would treat a black woman walking into a luxury jewelry store with no designer bag, no makeup, and an old car. She didn't need any other test. The world would show its true face on its own. Elaine Saunders had never thought of herself as racist. She was raised in a good family in Connecticut, attended a private school with Ivy League traditions where every student was taught how to conduct oneself properly, meaning always smile, always appear kind, and always maintain the appropriate distance from things that were different. Different like a black customer wearing a simple blazer, low-heeled shoes, no watch, and standing far too long in front of the Soleil Royal collection, which to Elaine was meant only for true aristocrats. Elaine wasn't rude. She didn't outright refuse service. She did exactly what she had been trained to do. Maintain a polite smile. Speak in a neutral, polished tone. Explain the prices as if they were unexpectedly high. And if the customer still didn't back away, steer them toward a more appropriate section. "Are you sure you want to see the Soleil collection?" Elaine asked again, her eyes briefly flicking over the unbranded purse on Celeste's shoulder. "Absolutely," Celeste replied. Her voice was soft but resolute, not the kind to let herself be pushed aside. Elaine nodded, still wearing that porcelain cold smile. Then, "Could you tell me the special occasion, so I can choose something that fits your budget?" Celeste blinked slowly. In 20 years in the luxury jewelry business, no staff member had ever asked her about her budget, not before knowing who she was. "There's no occasion," she said. "I simply want to browse." Elaine tilted her head slightly as if calculating how much trouble this customer might be. She hesitated, then retrieved the key to the display case, her movement slower than usual, deliberately dragging out the process to make Celeste feel unwelcome. Celeste stepped closer, her eyes gliding over the stones. The center stone fiery hue, she remarked. Sourced from Ethiopia or Namibia. Clarities about VVS1. The settings off-center by 2 millimeters. Elaine froze. Not every customer is aware of that, nor are many professionals. Have you worked in the industry before? Elaine asked, trying to stay composed. Celeste smiled. I care about details. That's how I live. Before Elaine could respond, the front bell chimed. A white couple entered, the man wearing Cartier glasses, the woman draped in a Hermes scarf. Elaine lit up like someone had flipped a switch. Mr. and Mrs. Blackridge, what an honor to see you again. She nearly forgot Celeste was still standing beside the now open display case. Elaine pulled out a velvet chair for the couple, poured chilled champagne into flutes, and expertly selected options that were just right for their taste. She didn't ask about their budget, didn't request financial verification, didn't hesitate each time they handled a piece worth hundreds of thousands. Celeste stood there, still. Her hand rested on the glass edge, silent. She didn't need to say anything to hear the message loud and clear. People like you don't belong here. Maya Lin, the newly hired Asian sales associate, saw everything. She was about to greet Celeste when Elaine shot her a quick look. Maya helped me sort the weekly orders in the back, she said lightly, but it was a command. Celeste watched Maya retreat quietly. Not angry, not disappointed, just sad. Sad for those who know what's right but remain trapped in a machine built on fear. 10 minutes later, Celeste was still there, like a live experiment on invisibility. Every other employee who passed by avoided their gaze. Only Ron, the black security guard, gave a subtle nod of acknowledgement. Elaine continued laughing and chatting with the Blackridges, but didn't forget to glance toward Celeste and whisper, "Sorry for the delay. We've had a lot of people lately trying their luck." The words fell softly, but to Celeste, they pierced like an old blade. She had heard those words before in Georgia at 19, in New York at 27, in Vegas at 32, and now, in the very store she had built with her own blood and vision. In the silent showroom, drenched in reflected diamond light, 3 people were observing, each in a different way. Ron Davis, 52, stood behind the security desk, tucked near the emergency exit, where he often watched more than he acted. A former Marine. He'd seen 2 wars, but none as bitter as the silent war of being a middle-aged black man trying to keep a job in the heart of Beverly Hills. He didn't know who this woman was, but he recognized the look in her eyes, the look of someone already judged before they said a single word. He'd seen his mother questioned for a credit card in a grocery store. His wife was told by a bank clerk, "Maybe this loan package would suit you better." And now he saw another woman, elegant in a way no one here understood, standing quietly, yet treated like a shadow. He gripped the strap of his radio and stayed still, because he knew sometimes the wrong reaction could cost you your job or much more. Maya Lin 3, the youngest sales associate in the store, was now in the stockroom, but her heart remained out in the main hall. She had never witnessed such blatant discrimination, not through action, but through inaction. When Elaine told her to go to the back, Maya walked away with a twisting feeling in her chest, because in that moment she had betrayed the very values she believed in, treating people with respect regardless of what they wear or drive. She had been top of her class in jewelry design at UCLA, had dreamed of working at Hartley and Grace, a brand once advertised as a place that honors diversity and character. But today, she saw the opposite. Maya stared at the ring box in her hands. Her hands trembled, and tears welled up not because of injustice done to her, but because of the injustice she had let pass in silence. Jared Boone, 29 assistant manager, was in the back office watching the security footage. He had seen it all from start to finish, and he was torn. Jared was white, grew up in Arizona. His father was a banker and his mother was an English teacher. He never thought of himself as racist, but he had also never questioned what was considered normal at work. When Elaine beamed at the Blackridges and turned cold to the other woman, Jared saw it. When Elaine said, "Someone is trying their luck," and looked toward her, Jared knew what was happening. But he also knew Elaine had direct influence over his promotion. He'd been promised a manager role if he performed well. And at Hartley and Grace, performing well sometimes meant don't poke your nose into things that aren't your business. In that fluorescent-lit, suffocating room, Celeste Hartley still stood tall. She knew this feeling. It wasn't foreign. Only now, it was happening within the empire she had built with her own hands. She felt each breath tighten in her chest. Not out of anger, but something colder, deeper, profound disappointment. Elaine was still smiling, still chatting, showcasing the rose de lune bracelet to Mrs. Blackridge, a piece priced at $275,000. The woman tried it on. "It feels a bit heavy," she said. Elaine smiled. "I can have it shaved down, keep the centerpiece, like classic French style." Both women laughed. Champagne glasses clinked. And on the other side of the room, Celeste still hadn't been offered a glass of water. Ron glanced at the clock. 17 minutes had passed since the woman walked in. 17 minutes of painful silence. 17 minutes in which, if she had been white, she could have purchased a bracelet and received a bouquet in thanks. Ron quietly pressed record on the internal camera system. Not because he knew who she was, but because he knew exactly what was happening. And this time, he would keep the evidence. Celeste remained beside the glass case, her hands resting gently on the cool, smooth surface. Her eyes never left the center diamond in the Soleil Royal collection, the very stone she had personally selected from a master cutter in Lyon during the 9th autumn of the company's existence. She remembered back then someone had asked her why she hadn't chosen a bigger, brighter, more popular gem. She answered, "I didn't choose it because it was the brightest. I chose it because it reflects the truth of whoever stands before it." Now that diamond reflected the image of a woman being ignored and of a service system choosing loyalty to prejudice over the brand's founding values. Elaine returned to the counter after nearly 20 minutes of treating the Blackridges as if they had descended from royalty. Mrs. Blackridge had selected a necklace. Mr. Blackridge promised to return for their anniversary. And Celeste. She was still standing there, not retreating, not making a scene, just looking Elaine straight in the eyes as she approached. "Apologies for the wait," Elaine said without meeting Celeste's gaze. "I thought you'd left." Celeste gave a small nod. No reaction. "I still want to see the center stone," she said. Elaine exhaled, unable to hide her impatience. "Do you understand? These pieces require a serious financial commitment." The words struck like a splash of cold water. Celeste remained composed. "I understand. I want to buy it." Elaine laughed, not the polished laugh of a sales professional, but the dismissive laugh of someone who no longer cared to pretend. "Ma'am," she said, voice tinged with arrogance, "that stone is worth over $350,000. If you want to buy it, I'll need to see proof of funds before we proceed. Proof black card. Bank statement, wire transfer confirmation, anything that proves you can afford it. Celeste narrowed her eyes. That sentence was a dull blade scraping across the pride she had built for 23 years. Is that your standard procedure for all customers? Her voice was soft, but everyone heard it. Elaine glanced sideways to where the Blackridges had just left without being asked for a card or proof or money. Then she turned back, her face hardening. For high-value items, we apply the same process to everyone. Just then, Jared stepped out of the control room. Maya returned quietly from the back. Ron, his hand near the security alert, still didn't move. You don't look like someone who buys things like this, Elaine added. The words came out sharp like thorns. You look like someone who tries things on and runs. That wasn't subtle anymore. It was an accusation. A flicker moved. Ron took one step forward. Jared inhaled deeply. Maya covered her mouth, her eyes wide. Celeste, still calm, said, "I'm not leaving." Elaine leaned toward the guard. "Ron, escort her out." Ron didn't move. She's loitering around the gemstones, won't verify finances, refusing to leave. Ron. That's an order. Ron slowly turned toward Celeste. He looked her in the eyes. A long, weighted silence. "Ma'am," Ron said quietly, "is there anything I can help you with?" Elaine nearly shouted, "I told you to get her out of here." "For what reason?" Ron asked, his tone steady. Elaine stammered, Because she looks like a thief." The entire room froze. Celeste took out her phone, but she didn't raise it to record. She dialed a number. Her voice rang out clear and deliberate. "Sarah, call an executive board meeting. Immediately. I'm at the Beverly Hills branch." The words detonated in the room, yet no one quite understood. Elaine furrowed her brow. "Who are you calling?" Celeste didn't answer. She just looked Elaine directly in the eyes. "You're standing in front of the person you thought couldn't afford this. But in fact, it's the person who's been signing your paychecks for the past 8 months. Elaine's face scrunched in confusion. "What?" Celeste set her phone down, quietly pulled a thin, gold-embossed business card from her wallet. Celeste Hartley, founder and CEO, Hartley and Grace. No one spoke. No one moved. Only Elaine's audible gasp, and Maya's eyes began to fill with tears. Elaine Saunders stared at the business card Celeste placed on the glass as if it were a fake prop or a nightmare made real. Celeste Hartley, the founder, the CEO, the woman who owned the entire Hartley and Grace empire. That name, Elaine had seen it on every company-wide email, in policy handbooks, on the covers of internal magazines she often tossed into her drawer without reading. But she had never imagined she'd meet that person. And if she ever did, surely not in the form of a black woman in an unbranded blazer who drove a Civic and waited 20 minutes without being offered a glass of water. Elaine stepped back. Her hand trembled. Her voice cracked. "You can't be. I didn't know." Celeste picked up the card again as gently as lifting a feather and tucked it back into her pocket. "Didn't know," she said, her voice tight like a drawn violin string. "You didn't know who I was, but you were certain about who I couldn't be." A silence fell heavy as stone. Maya stood frozen behind the counter, eyes wide, gripping her phone, still showing Celeste's photo on the company homepage, Building Grace, the journey of America's first black luxury jewelry CEO. Jared took a step forward. I... I'm sorry. I... Celeste raised her hand. I know you saw everything. I know you didn't stop it. Jared swallowed hard, his face pale. But you still have a chance to stand on the right side of this. Don't lose it just because you're afraid of losing your position. Elaine now seemed to collapse. Her once proud appearance, her meticulously curled hair, her sparkling Cartier, now just a fragile shell covering a terrified spirit. Ms. Hartley, I swear I didn't mean it. I was trying to protect the store's image. I didn't recognize you. You thought I was who Celeste cut in. Her eyes were unwavering. Someone who wasn't high enough. Didn't fit with the clientele here. Celeste closed her eyes, took a deep breath, then opened them again, the eyes of someone who this very system had once locked out and now stood atop it. And because of that thought, she said slowly, "You did the one thing that cannot be forgiven. You insulted your customer in your own store owned by the very woman who built it." Elaine nearly collapsed into herself. "Please, don't fire me. I have kids, a mortgage. I was trying to do a good job." Celeste was silent, then said softly, "Elaine, politeness is not morality, and fear is not remorse." By now, customers had begun to gather, many of them holding up their phones to record. Ron, still near the security desk, didn't intervene. He knew this was a moment that would redefine the entire system. Celeste turned to Jared. "You saw everything. What do you plan to report?" Jared choked, then said, I'll report the truth." Celeste nodded. "Good, because I need a real manager, not someone who holds the title." Jared looked up, stunned. "You'll be the new manager of this branch, effective immediately." Elaine gasped. "No, you can't!" "And you," Celeste turned back to Elaine, "you will have 30 minutes to gather your things and leave the store you once thought was yours." Elaine collapsed into the leather chair. Tears flowed uncontrollably. But Celeste didn't look at her with hatred. She looked with regret, as if she were seeing herself 20 years ago had she let prejudice win. Celeste turned and walked toward Maya, the only person who tried to help before being stopped. "You were the only one who didn't turn away. Thank you for that." Maya whispered, eyes misty. "I just thought everyone deserves to be treated with kindness." Celeste nodded. "And that's exactly why you'll be the new assistant manager. You and Jared will build a store I'll be proud to visit any time." Elaine Saunders slumped into the soft leather chair that had once symbolized her authority in this store. Her carefully applied makeup was now smudged with streaks of mascara, and her eyes were wild, like someone just waking from a nightmare. In front of her, Celeste Hartley still stood tall, not angry, not vengeful, not shouting. Just a woman powerful in her calm, terrifying in her complete control. "Please," Elaine sobbed. "I know I was wrong. I was under sales pressure. I wasn't thinking straight." "It's not that you weren't thinking straight, Elaine." Celeste interrupted, her voice still soft as breath. "You were thinking too quickly, acting on instincts programmed by a society long ago, and you followed those instincts without ever stopping to ask, am I being fair?" Elaine hung her head, burying her face in her hands. "I'll change. I'll go back and study diversity behavior. Just please, don't take everything away." Celeste looked at her for a long, still moment. You're not losing everything because of one mistake, she said, but because of a consistent pattern of behavior that proves you're not aligned with the philosophy I built this on. The atmosphere in the store was frozen. No one was shopping anymore. All eyes were on the black woman, the one who had been doubted, humiliated, then quietly pulled back the curtain of power, now standing across from the woman who had once ruled this branch. Jared, still stunned by the sudden turn of events, stepped forward. Ms. Hartley, would you like me to call HR? Celeste shook her head. No, I'll handle it myself. This is my lesson to close. She turned to Ron Davis, the middle-aged security guard. You refuse to carry out an unethical order. Do you know how important that is? Ron replied slowly. I know the world rarely punishes silence. But today I couldn't stay quiet any longer. Celeste smiled. And for that, you'll receive a commendation for professional integrity, along with a special bonus from the executive board. Ron bowed his head, saying nothing. But his eyes shimmered not from the money, but from seeing himself reflected in the mirror of trust. At that moment, Maya was still trying to make sense of what had happened. Why, me? She asked softly. I just did what I was supposed to. And that Celeste said is exactly why you're the one I need. Someone who sees human dignity as instinct, not something taught from a training manual. Maya lowered her head. For the first time in her life, she felt seen not for her effort, but for her essence. Celeste turned her gaze back to Elaine, who now looked like a blurred shadow of her former pride. You'll leave this store with whatever is left of your self-respect. I will not humiliate you. I will not put your name in the press. I will not leak this footage online, because I don't believe in mob justice. Elaine looked up, her eyes soaked with tears. You won't post anything. Celeste shook her head. I won't destroy you, but your behavior will speak for itself in your records, in your reputation, in the places you apply to next. An older man, a customer, stepped forward. His hands trembled slightly, but his eyes glowed. Ms. Hartley, I don't know what to say, but the way you handled this, it's the most dignified thing I've ever witnessed. Celeste nodded a gentle gesture of thanks. She walked back to the Soleil Royal display case where it had all begun. Quietly, she adjusted it, still a few millimeters off, just as it had been when she first entered. A small gesture, but heavy with meaning, order had been restored. Then she turned to face the entire room, the staff, the customers, the lights, and the breathless silence. In this store and in every store that bears the name Hartley and Grace, the size of a bank account does not measure luxury. It is measured by how we treat one another. Elaine slowly stood, her face pale, tears still tracing down both cheeks, mixing with the smeared lines of makeup. Her once tidy hair now hung loose, falling apart with each heavy step. She carried a small cardboard box inside, which was a tube of lipstick, a notebook, and a hair clip engraved with the initial of her name. She reached the door, then stopped. Turned back toward Celeste. The woman she had called unsuitable just 1 hour ago. Her voice shook, splintering like glass dropped on stone. Ms. Hartley. I know. It's too late for apologies, but I still want to say it. Celeste stood still, unmoving. The overhead light touched her curls like they were forged of some unbreakable metal. Elaine swallowed hard. I never truly thought I was racist. I just got too used to judging people based on how they look. I grew up that way. And when I saw you, I only saw someone who didn't look like the people we typically serve. I was wrong. Celeste blinked, but she didn't respond, not right away. Elaine took a deep breath, her eyes pleading. I can start over. I can learn. Change. Do whatever it takes. Please. Don't let one mistake destroy everything. Give me one more chance. A long pause. Then Celeste stepped toward her, not fast, not slow. Her eyes were no longer sharp, but they weren't soft either. Elaine, she began, if this were just one impulsive moment, if you'd raised your voice or lost your temper, I could let it go. Elaine swallowed hard. But this wasn't a moment. Celeste continued. This was a pattern, a string of decisions made over and over again, not by accident, but from a repeated, distorted belief. She paused. Then, in a voice that struck like quiet lightning, you weren't fired for losing control once. You were fired because you controlled everything in a way that made people like me never stand a chance of being seen as worthy. Elaine cried again, but this time she didn't argue. This time it was the silence of someone who knew there was nothing left to defend. Celeste tilted her head, her eyes fixed on Elaine. You said you'd learn, said you'd change. But Elaine, I'm not a teacher. I'm a builder of values, and no one has the right to wreck them, then ask to start over using someone else's foundation. Elaine trembled, her lips barely forming the words, I understand. Celeste nodded. Good, because understanding is the first step. But accountability is the last. At that moment, the automatic door opened. The soft golden light of a Beverly Hills afternoon streamed in, casting a glow over Elaine's bowed shoulders as she walked out a shadow with no outline. Just before crossing the threshold, she turned one last time. Ms. Hartley, she said, using the correct name for the first time. I know I don't deserve to be here. But if I learned anything today, it's this: dignity isn't in the label someone wears. It's in how they stay silent and then step into the light. Celeste didn't reply. She just stood there, still as stone, steady as a mountain. Elaine walked out the door, and in that moment, no one in the store said a word. But everyone knew justice had just been served, not through power, but through grace. When the glass door closed behind Elaine Saunders, no one in the store said a word, not out of fear, but because they had just witnessed something modern society rarely shows us. A black woman who not only upheld her dignity in the face of injustice, but taught the entire system what justice truly means. Through calm. Celeste didn't walk away immediately. She remained there for a moment, as if allowing everyone to breathe in that moment, to remember it, to reflect, to let those who had stayed silent feel the weight of their silence. Then softly she turned and walked back toward the Soleil Royal display case where it had all begun. That case, since the moment she entered, had been misaligned by about 3 millimeters from the tile seams beneath it. To the average person, it is insignificant. To Celeste, it was a slight misalignment that could throw the entire standard off. She bent down gently, used both hands to nudge the glass edge back into place. No force, just a subtle correction, just enough to restore balance. Jared, Maya, and Ron, standing nearby, watched silently. And they understood instantly. This wasn't just about adjusting a display case. This was about restoring the soul of the space. Celeste turned to look at each member of the team. First, Jared, you were silent, but when called upon, you chose to stand on the right side. And so, she extended her hand. Congratulations, new manager of the Beverly Hills branch. Jared stood frozen, then stepped forward to shake her hand. His palm was cold not from fear, but shock. But in his eyes now was the trust being returned. Next was Maya. Celeste smiled. You were the only one who wanted to come closer to me before knowing who I was. Unconditional kindness is the hardest thing to teach in any training program. From her pocket, she pulled out a small envelope. Inside is your official appointment letter as assistant manager. You and Jared will rebuild this team together. And I believe you'll teach many things no manual has ever written. Maya's hands trembled as she took the envelope. But she didn't cry. She lifted her chin as if to say, I won't let you down. Finally, Celeste turned to Ron, the older guard jacket worn at the shoulders, eyes weathered by life. You were the only one who received an order and refused to carry it out. Because you knew it was wrong. And not everyone can do that, especially when survival is on the line. Celeste pulled out a folded document embossed with the executive seal. This is a certificate of professional ethics from the executive office. It comes with a special bonus and priority in choosing your schedule across all Hartley and Grace stores. Ron stood straighter. He said nothing, but he bowed deeply, the kind of bow he once reserved only for commanding officers in the service. Celeste scanned the store, the light reflecting off the gems, the polished glass walls, the classical music still playing in the background as if nothing had happened. She stepped toward the center of the room, took a deep breath, then spoke not loudly but enough to carry to every corner of the store. Dear customers, she said, turning to the crowd that had witnessed everything. I apologize for what you've just seen, but I also ask you to remember this was not a mishap. This was a moment to reaffirm what we stand for. Cameras were still recording. Eyes were still fixed on her. Celeste continued, I built Hartley and Grace not just to sell jewelry, but to create a space where everyone, regardless of skin color, background, or status, can be seen, heard, and respected. We don't fix incidents. We fix the entire process. And that starts today. Applause broke out, not thunderous, but steady. An elderly customer approached. Ms. Hartley, I didn't just buy jewelry today. I witnessed a leadership lesson I've never seen in my lifetime. Celeste smiled, said nothing. She gently touched the old silver bracelet on her wrist, the only thing her mother had left her. A bracelet worth nothing in the display case, but worth everything in the empire she had just protected from slipping off course. Celeste Hartley stood in the flagship store that bore her name, where every inch of marble tile, every glass panel, every light fixture had been chosen by her heart, and which had just been safeguarded from what could have destroyed it, the silent rot of prejudice, disguised in politeness and privilege. She looked around. The staff had returned to their positions. But the atmosphere was no longer the same, because something had broken open, and it had broken to let light in. Jared was now coordinating the team, his voice steadier, every word weighted with both opportunity and responsibility. Maya quietly reorganized the display. She placed each ring, each bracelet this time, with hands that knew they were trusted. Ron stood near the entrance, tall eyes scanning the space. Not just as a guard, but as a gatekeeper of a newly restored value. Celeste didn't need to say anything else. No emergency meeting, no policy memo. Because the way she had responded, it was the strongest directive she could ever give. She returned to the Soleil Royal case one last time. By now, the evening sun was streaming through the front windows, casting a ribbon of light straight onto the central diamond. She looked into the gem, the one that had made others question if she belonged. Then she touched the glass gently, as if to thank it for revealing what needed to be purified. A middle-aged woman approached Celeste. "Ms. Hartley," she said, placing her hand over her heart. "What you just did, it made me reconsider many things. I've judged people, too, believed in first impressions." Celeste smiled, her gaze free of reproach. "A first impression is never a fault," she said. "But we are at fault, if we let it be the only one." The woman nodded, eyes glistening. "Thank you for not shouting, and still making all of us go silent." Celeste turned to a group of customers near the counter. A young man held up his phone, still live streaming. She walked toward him, not to stop him, not to scold. "You're recording, right?" she asked gently. He nodded, slightly flustered. "Then let me say this, so those out there, the ones who weren't here, can hear it too." Celeste looked straight into the camera, her voice calm, deliberate, each word falling like truth. "I didn't build Hartley and Grace to prove I deserve to stand in the places that once rejected me. I built it so others wouldn't have to prove they belong, just because they don't look like someone in a magazine. Because luxury doesn't start with price. It starts with dignity." She paused, then raised her hand and touched the worn silver bracelet on her left wrist. The bracelet her mother had worn while cleaning houses, then left for her daughter as an heirloom, not of wealth but of an entire universe of sacrifice. "This bracelet was once called cheap," she said. "But it's taken me through rooms diamonds could never unlock, because what it carries isn't light. It's memory." Maya, standing nearby, fought back tears. Jared gripped the notebook in his hand. Ron, who had once stayed silent for fear of losing his job, now stood tall, needing no command. Celeste nodded, then said the final words, for them and herself. "Success is not standing at the top. Success, it's when they try to push you out of where you belong, you stay. Calm, composed, and without needing anyone's permission." She turned and walked out of the store. The golden afternoon sun streamed down her natural curls, casting her shadow long across the white marble floor. No applause, no dramatic music, no slogan, just a woman, walking into the light because she had never really left it. Sometimes what people remember about you, it isn't what you carry in your hand, but how you kept your spine straight when no one stood with you.